and grow. Took me 10 years to find something close. Very good. Angelina, and that's when you're like, oh. Thanks, Rick.
My Put it in the car and give somebody a shot. Sure, that's fine. From Savannah, Georgia, really? Wow. Certainly. I don't know what closer places you could have come from, Georgia. If you're in Nashville.
It's worth it. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Genius!
Amen.
Well, you guys are an enthusiastic bunch. Have you been giving them ouzo or something like that? Well, thank you all for coming out. It's great to see everyone here. This is the last, well, it's not the last stop on my American tour. I have one local one now, but it's the last stop of the traveling ones. Tomorrow I get to fly home and have Thanksgiving and rest my signing hand for a while. Which will be welcome, believe me, because I've been on the road. I went to, on October 14th, I went to England for the British tour and did a number of cities there. And then I went to, straight from England on to Italy for the Duca game and comic show, where the Italian game was coming out. That was a great time, but I managed to come home for 3 days before I had to start this tour with in the Midwest with more cities that I can count with. And I've been getting great turnouts everywhere, which is very gratifying, although my hand occasionally threatens to gangrenous and fall off. It could be a real problem because I read all the books just with this finger. Not that I'm complaining, mind you. This is a problem that many writers would kill to have, these very large turnouts and this level of enthusiasm. In fact, this writer would have killed to have it for most of his career. It has not always been like this by any means. As many of you may know, some of you know, maybe many is a bit accepting, some of you know that I actually was writing long before Songs of Stars and Shadows, or before Song of Ice and Fire. I sold my first story in 1971, my first book came out in '76. I had a whole first career in science fiction, horror, short stories for magazines, and then I spent 10 years in Hollywood for my sins. And because I wrote a book that didn't sell very well, it's still a good book, damn it, but nobody bought it, and that was sad for me for a while, so I had to go to Los Angeles. And then I came back with Ice and Fire, and I got a second lease on life with this, which has been very gratifying. But I've had a few signings in my time that have not been as well received as this. I remember when Game of Thrones did come out in '96, my publisher sent me on a a tour which began in Texas. And of course, by that point, I'd been out of the book field for like 10 years. So a lot of people had forgotten whatever name I had. I was almost starting all over again in '96. So we started the tour in Texas. I did a signing in Houston, a little specialty store, where about 10 people came in. It was a nice time. I liked it. There were 10 nice people. I signed their books. We chatted for a while. We went out for barbecue. A small but enthusiastic group.
Let's go.
Then I went on to Austin, where I had a much bigger turnout. Austin was very nice because, actually, I was cheating though, because in Austin, I had a long relationship with people in Austin, Lisa Tuttle, Howard Waldrop, other writers I had been friends with for many years. I'd often visited Austin. So we got a substantial turnout, but many of them were people I know, and those don't really count. Your friends have to show up. It's like when you do your first book signing and your mother comes. It doesn't really count. And then I went on to Dallas, where I got my first taste of that perhaps the second career was not going to be as immediately, hugely best-selling as I would have wished. It actually seemed well when we pulled into the parking lot of the Barnes & Noble there in Dallas. There were the parking lot was very crowded. There were a lot of people streaming in. And I thought, hey, great, we're going to have a really good turnout for this event. Because there's a big crowd here today. But that was not quite accurate. It turned out there were 2 signings there that day in Dallas. I was signing Game of Thrones in the front of the store. And in the back of the store, Clifford the Big Red Dog was Clifford has a different method of touring than most writers. Clifford, they send around this moth-eaten dog suit from bookstore to bookstore across the country. And the junior member of whatever bookstore has to put it on, and it's like one of the Disney suits with the big head, and you can't see, and it's very hot, and or so I'm told. And his paw was specially leathered or something, and they had a giant red ink pad, so he would stamp with a big red paw. And Clifford drew hundreds of people to his event, and I drew 2. But it was not actually that was not actually the worst turnout I got on that tour. I then, sometime later, I went on to St. Louis, Missouri. And I love St. Louis, Missouri. It's a great town. I visit there frequently. They have a terrific science fiction convention there called Archon, which they started in 1977, and they had me as their first guest of honor back when I had only published a handful of short stories in 1 book. So I was always very grateful to the folks in St. Louis, and I like to go back to Archon as often as I can. The thing is that Archon, some time ago, had actually moved out of St. Louis proper to get cheaper hotel rooms and more space. So they moved to a convention center and a hotel complex in Collinsville, Illinois, which was 30 miles away on the other side of the Mississippi River, not far from St. Louis, but still some psychological distance being in another state and all. And I told my publisher that, he was sending me his tour, that I was already committed to go to Archon, so I still wanted to do it. He said, well, fine, we'll schedule you. Gosh, there'll be a lot of science fiction fans there. We should have a really good event there. We'll schedule you to sign in St. Louis during the Archon weekend, and they did. But they didn't quite get this Collinsville-St. Louis distinction, see. So I was scheduled to sign on Saturday night in St. Louis, while every science fiction fantasy fan in the St. Louis metropolitan area was in Collinsville, Illinois, where Archon had its current guest of honor, a gentleman by the name of Ray Bradbury. Ray Bradbury doesn't actually like to travel very much, as some of you may know. So to avoid being lonely on this trip, he had brought his friend Ray Harryhausen along with him. So Ray and Ray were signing Saturday night in St. Louis, or in Collinsville rather, and I was signing simultaneously 30 miles away in downtown St. Louis at a leftist feminist bookstore. I'm not entirely sure what I thought Game of Thrones would be appropriate or would appeal to the customers of a leftist feminist bookstore. It does have some women in it, but I don't know that politics can necessarily be described as left of center, because it is, after all, medieval, so we're talking feudalism. But there I was, and I walked into the bookstore. It was one of those bookstores with a coffee shop attached, a small store. Had a nice little coffee shop with maybe 10 little round tables and kind of stools that you sit on. And then out on the sidewalk, they had a couple more tables for sort of that Parisian sidewalk cafe effect. But it was night, so there was nobody out on the sidewalk. It was just the people in the coffee shop. When I walked in, there were two couples sitting there drinking their cappuccinos. And the manager was very nice, very apologetic. So, well, there's only 4 people. It's really not much of a crowd. I'm sorry we couldn't do better for you. You know, you don't have to speak if you don't want to, I'll just say. And I said, no, you know, they came. I'm here, they're here. I might as well go ahead, let's do it. I'll talk a little, I'll read from the book, I'll answer a few questions, we'll get on from there. And the manager said, let's wait a little while, maybe somebody else will come in. So we waited 5 minutes, nobody else came in. We waited 10 minutes, nobody else came in. We waited 15 minutes. The manager said, well, I guess nobody else is coming in, so if you really want to do it, you know, we'll do it. And I said, yeah, might as well. So the manager got up, just as Charles just did, and said, they had a big stack of Game of Thrones beside the podium, the silver foil cover that some of you may remember, some of you may have, which is now, of course, worth a small fortune, so don't get mugged. But back then it was only $22. They had a stack of those and a little microphone at the podium. And the manager got up and said, now we're bringing up George R. Martin. He's going to read from his new fantasy novel and answer questions. And the 4 people took their cappuccinos and got up and went outside. So, I hear other writers say, well, I had a signing and no one came to it. I sneered at them because I achieved a score of -4. Needless to say, things have changed very nicely. Looking at all you people, none of you seem to be leaving, and that's very good. The books have done progressively better and better, which I'm very pleased to say. The second book, Clash of Kings, appeared on the New York Times bestseller list at number 13. The third book, Stone and Swords, climbed up to number 12, and as Charles has said, this book has just achieved number 1. So, I'm trying my best to remain becomingly modest about that. But it's hard. I really want to be leaping about the stage shouting, I'm number 1, I'm number 1.
Go for it. You won't mind.
I do need to thank some people, though, for this. I need to thank, first of all, my agents, Kirby and Kay McCauley. I need to thank my editors at Bantam, Jennifer Hershey, who bought the series initially, when I was a largely forgotten writer coming back from the world of television. Ann Grohl, who has edited all of the series since Jennifer left Bantam. I need to thank Chris Artis, my publicist, and some of the bigwigs at Bantam, Erwin Applebaum, Edith Taldlip, who have been extremely supportive of this series right from the very beginning and have been very patient with me. And not only with me delivering the book slightly late, as some of you may know, but with taking off the way they perhaps might have hoped it has. And their patience has been rewarded, but they stuck by me when the book was not a big hit, and I'm very grateful for that. I also want to thank the booksellers. You know, a book can't succeed without the booksellers, and the best people in the world that work in bookstores, the ones that really know books. I'm sure you've met a few of the other kind too, at certain stores that we won't mention here. They might as well be selling cheeseburgers at McDonald's, but the good booksellers are not like that. They love books, they know books, they care about books, they read books, and they're always glad to talk books with their customers and to recommend a book to interested customer who's looking for a good mystery or a good novel or a reference on this, that, and the other thing, or a good work of fantasy. I can't tell you how many times I've entered bookstores, especially independent bookstores, and so that little staff recommends sticker underneath one of my books. I think that has a lot with what I've achieved. You guys have a rare treasure here in Tattered Cover, and I hope you will continue to patronize and support it. It's one of the great bookstores in the country, one of the great bookstores in the world.
Yes, it is.
And finally, I want to thank you, the readers, because you're really the most important people of all in the success this book has achieved, the series has achieved. As I've been doing this tour in Nashville, in Dayton, Ohio, in Ann Arbor, Michigan, Indianapolis, in Madison, Wisconsin, New York City, in the Bay Area, Los Angeles, San Diego, Seattle, and now I expect tonight, but at every stop, people are coming up to me with multiple copies of the book, and they're saying, well, this one is for me, and this one is for my friend Fred, who was the one who first turned me on to it, and this one is for my other friend Bill, who I got reading the series, and now he hates me because the new one's too late. I get this over and over again at the signing, and the message is very clear of how much word of mouth has spread the books of these networks of recommendations. You know, books don't become bestsellers by chance. There are reasons books are bestsellers. Some books become bestsellers because the publisher spends a fortune in advertising, and you see the ads on television and the posters in the subways and on the sides of buses. Some books become bestsellers because the author is a celebrity, a politician, an actor, someone involved in a scandal, all of the above. Some books become bestsellers because Oprah likes them. But I have not been involved in any scandals. The publisher has not put my face on the sides of any buses, and I don't think Oprah would like the series very much. So I've become a bestseller. It's largely because of you guys, because of the word of mouth and the way you've recommended it to each other and spread the word. And please continue to do that, and also give yourselves a big hand of applause. I'm very thrilled to be number one, and I can say that I'm ready for Clifford. Bring him on. I want a rematch. We're going to throw it open for questions shortly, but the first question that I always get asked at these things, I'll answer before we do that, and that's, why is the book so late? It is late. I'm sorry it's late. It's not 5 years late. It's only 3 years late. Don't say it's 5 years late. Yes, 5 years between books, but I was supposed to have 2 to write it in. So the clock has only been ticking for 3 here. And you know, what can I tell you? Some books are hard to write, and this one is especially hard. And I made some wrong decisions. Those of you who had Tattered Cover 5 years ago when I toured for Stone and Swords may remember me talking there about my plans for the next book. I made that speech at many of these promotional things. I made that speech in interviews. I made that speech in conventions. And I always talked about this 5-year gap, my intention to leap forward 5 years from the end of Storm of Swords and resume the story 5 years later to allow some of the children to grow up. It was a good speech, but not such a good strategy, and that was part of why the book is late. I tried to write the 5-year gap, and it did work pretty well for some of the kids, leaping forward 5 years, picking up they're slightly older. But you know, it didn't work as at all for the older characters. I found myself writing scenes on the wall with Jon Snow, you know, saying, well, it's been 5 years since I was elected Lord Commander. Nothing much has happened. But I have a sense of foreboding things are going to start to go bad now. That didn't work. Alternatively, I was writing scenes in King's Landing with Cersei and people saying, oh, what a tumultuous 5 years it's been. We had that, you know, big revolt 4 years ago, and, you know, then there was the plague 3 years ago. God, my last 3 hands have all died. And, I was telling all these things rather than showing them. I was presenting them as memories or flashbacks. So that didn't work either. So, but I think, you know, sometimes I talk too much, and I talked at all those things. I made such a big deal of a 5-year gap that I felt compelled to try to pull it off. And I beat myself over the head for it for a good part of the year before I finally abandoned it. So you won't find any 5-year gap in the Feast for Crows. And if any of you didn't realize that, and hoping to have 5 years later, you're going to be sadly disappointed. It's not, in fact, even 5 minutes later. It actually opens before the proceeding. Yes, it's a bit of an overlap there. The other problem I ran into was toward the end of the book was the whole question of length, and that also delayed the book. You know, Storm of Swords was 1,500 pages of manuscript, which is just about at the point where a book becomes unpublishable. You know, much longer than that, and pages start to fall out, and the spine cracks, and the building can't hold it anymore. And the risks of old people crack as they hold them up in the bed. My own wrist was aching sometimes with a dreadful Storm. So the publishers made it clear they didn't want another book of 1,500 pages with length of Storm, and I said, no problem. The next one will be the length of Clash of Kings, about 1,200 pages of manuscript. Again, me and my big mouth opening it. Needless to say, about a year and a half ago, I passed 1,200 pages and it wasn't nearly done. And then I passed 1,300 pages and it wasn't nearly done. And 1,400 pages wasn't nearly done. When I hit earlier this year 1,500 pages and actually passed the length of Storm of Swords and it still wasn't nearly done, I knew I had a problem. My publisher at that point and I had a long conversation, and we decided, well, I said, come on, how many pages could I have really? I said, wrap it up in another 100 pages, and we'll get it all into one book. Maybe we'll have to print it in microtype, we'll do a magnifying glass with every copy, but we'll do it somehow. So I was frantically trying in the winter and spring of this year to finish the book in something under 1,600 pages and changes, under 1,700 pages anyway. And I passed that too.
We want all the story.
So that's the point I decided it's something I had to be doing. I mean, what obviously to do would be to cut the book, but I felt that would make it a lesser book. And, you know, you can't achieve significant reduction simply by, you know, taking out a few adjectives or a sentence here or there. I would have actually had to cut chapters, characters, storylines, and that would have diminished the book, I think. So then we were facing the question of splitting the book. And our first impulse was to just split the book right down the middle, publish the first book as Feast for Crows Part 1, and follow it with Feast for Crows Part 2, assuming I could finish that in a relatively short period of time. They each would have, I would have had to find a break point around page 850 or so. Well, there was no break point that satisfied me. It would have been very, very much half a book, everything would have left off kind of right in the middle, not on a cliffhanger, not on any sense of resolution. I think it would have been a very unsatisfying read, at least it was to me. So what we've done instead is we did split the book, but we didn't split it by chronology, we split it by geography. A friend of mine, a brilliant, young, talented fantasy writer, Daniel Abraham, whose own fantasy trilogy will be coming out next year, pointed out that much of my action was taking place in the equivalent of, let us say, England, but some of my action was taking place simultaneously in the equivalent of, let us say, China. So it, those two things didn't necessarily need to be in the same book, although they were occurring at the same time. And it was a great idea, and I should have thought of it myself, because they did the same thing with a Wildcard book decades ago. So we divided it by character. And I think it works pretty well, but you guys will be the ultimate judge when you read it. I think the book that results is more focused and concentrated than the mega feast would have been. And this will also allow me more time and more pages, most importantly, to finish the other storylines, the ones that aren't in this book, Tyrion and Dany, which I had resolved, but I hadn't resolved them in a sense that I was completely happy with. Now I would be able to add more chapters to them and be happy. And I'll be able to resolve the stuff on the wall, which was the stuff that I was still writing and wrestling with. So, as a result of the split, I do have now 500 pages written on A Dance with Dragons. I need to do at least another 500 or 600, of course, but my hope is that once Thanksgiving is over and they chain me back to my word processor and I put my little finger to work, I will be able to finish the book inside of a year and maybe be back here this time next year with the dance. So we'll see. Watch my website for updates. That's the only place that has accurate updates. Don't watch any other place than my website. Do watch other places on my website. Don't email me asking if they're right. Not only my website is right. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And now we'll take some questions from you guys. Yes?
I hear that you have Dunkin' Egg 3 ready, or...
I wish I had Dunkin' Egg 3 ready. I have Dunkin' Egg 3 half written, and I did want to try to finish it before I went on this tour, but unfortunately I did not get that done. So I will be returning to that too. I don't know where it will be published, however, since Robert Silverberg doesn't want to continue with the Legends series. So Legends 2 will be the last Legends, but I'll find some home for it, I'm sure. So again, watch my website for news on that one too. There will be another Dunkin' Egg comic book, however. I've sold the rights to the Dabble brothers, who did the first one, to do The Sworn Sword as a graphic novel, comic book series, the graphic novel. Same creative team, Ben Avery doing the scripting and Mike Miller doing the art, so it should be just as good as the first one. Yes?
Will Dance have a longer timeline than Feast?
Perhaps slightly, yes.
Would you repeat
It
the
won't.
question?
Will Dance have a longer timeline than Feast? Yes, it may. It all depends on, of course, on after I get it up to the same point, if I'm at 1,500 pages or 1,100. But if I'm at 1,100, then I do have a couple more pages to add, take the story a little bit beyond where it's left in terms of chronology with Feast. Yes?
I noticed that your series has taken some other alternate routes with a board game and a collectible card game, and now this art book from the collectible card game. How much input do you have with all of that, and do you foresee more, non-book related material with your series?
The question was the spin-off products, the collectible card game, the board game, and the degree that I have input. Well, I do have rights of approval on all of those products. I did not want to simply cash the check and take the chance that they put out a shoddy product. I took some care in selecting my partners and had initial conversations with them about the approach they intended to take to make sure that things would, I think, be representative of Westeros, the world of Ice and Fire, and that my fans would get a good value for that. I tried, when the collectible card game first came out, I tried to be involved, very involved in the art to make it accurate. And we did one of the sets, one of the early sets where I was very heavily involved. They were sending me all the sketches, but I was giving notes to the artists, and then they would send me the finished or the color version, and I would give more notes to the artist, and they would change things. But basically, I was driving the artist nuts. And also, it was an enormous time sink. It was taking tons of time for me. You know, I'd sit down to write, and I would have had 15 pieces of art to approve, and I'd have to look at them all and say, no. He has a beard, and no, this guy there's a pommel of his sword is different, you know, because I know this world too well. And finally, I sort of had to step back from that a little. I don't get involved at all with the game mechanics. Essentially, then I have to trust those guys to do it. I've never even played a collectible card game. Although those who have tell me that it's an excellent collectible card game. I have played their board game a couple times. I've always lost. I think that for some reason people gang up on me and betray me. And,
I guess what I'm really getting down to is, when are we going to see the action figures?
I want a John Peel action figure.
well, I do have a line of figures coming out. I have a deal with Testers. Details are on my website.
Wow.
Testers is coming out with a miniatures-based game and a line of pewter miniatures to go with it. It will be a skirmish level game. The pewter miniatures will be 1/30th scale, wargaming scale. And with Tom Meyer, who's about the best wargaming miniatures sculptor designer in the business, is designing them. They're gorgeous. I've seen some prototypes. I visited his studio in Cincinnati on tour. They're just stunning. So there will be that game. Testers is also coming out with a line of 150 with 54 millimeter figures. That's the traditional toy soldier size, which I collect. If you've ever seen my website, the Knights section, I have lots of my own collection there. Those figures will not go with the game, but will be for you to buy in kit form and take home and paint. And those two, Tom Meyer is doing a lot of them. They will also be gorgeous. And finally, there will be a line of larger scale 1/18 figures done in resin. Those will be cast in resin and pre-painted in China, so no painting necessary. Just buy them, put them on your shelf. And the first of those should be out before the end of the year, so things are moving ahead on all fronts. So you'll be able to get these figures in 3 different scales. And I'm having a lot of fun playing with that. So, that's against the wall there.
Yeah, I was wondering if there are ever going to be plans to include a whole world map, or at least one that involves the free cities.
There'll be a free cities map in advance. I've never wanted to do a world map because it seemed to me, you know, I'm trying to put you in the place of the characters. And the characters don't have a world map, you know, they're like medieval kind of guys. You ever see a medieval map of our world? You know? It's, you know, like, okay, here's a map of England. They get England pretty right, like it's an English map, you know, and then across the water they get France pretty good, and Spain, you know, but then beyond, Germany is oddly shaped, and then there's Russia, which is, you know, 3 times as small as it should be, and then there's like mountains where there are none, and you know, then there's the realm of Prester John, and then there's dragons and monsters and people with 3 heads. That's the medieval view of the world, so it should be the view of my world too. So the characters don't have a medieval world map, but you can piece one together by taking the little maps they can give you and cutting them out and fitting them all together. I encourage you to cut the maps out of your books because then you'll need new books. Yes, yes, you.
Where on earth is Brienne in Peaceful Road? I can't find her on the map.
Can't find her on the map. Well, I don't know why. The places she goes are pretty much all on the map. Yes.
You originally stated that your plan was for 6
novels, and with the time gap in between. Would you-
Seven.
But with the time that you ditched, the time gap that you ditched, are you gonna have to expand that more? Because Dance originally had a set plan, but now it's the second half of the piece for Crow.
It's going to be 7. It was going to be 3 once upon a time.
Is your alternative?
I sold it originally as a trilogy. It was going to be Game of Thrones, A Dance with Dragons, and Winds of Winter. A Dance with Dragons is a book I never actually seem to get to. I always start writing it, but somehow another book pushes us up in the rank. So if I actually succeed, and I'm back here next year with a book that's called A Dance with Dragons, that will be a great triumph. So I certainly hope I'm doing that, and I will decide that I have to insert another one in the next one. Dance with Dragons, sometimes I think is the book I can't catch up with. I'm just chasing after it. It's just receding before me like the carrot that comes from a horse's head. But, you know, I got to write it because otherwise someone's going to steal the title. It's a great title. Dance with Dragons. I like it since I first came up